government is no longer being run by common sense. I mean, I've been in the government, in and out of the government since the 1970s. And for example, in the Pentagon, there was in the Reagan administration, Peter Grace, leading Wall Street guy, did a Grace Commission, kind of similar to the DOGE, Elon Musk look at government. And he had all these great recommendations. None of them were followed because, the bureaucracy doesn't want to follow them. And when you get to the point where we now are, where the people in the bureaucracy, they can leak selectively to their friends in the Democrat media, they can slow walk any recommendations from a president, they can really do whatever they want. It's gone beyond the point of takeover by government.
They should be panicked. They should be fearful. They should be crying because they have politicized and weaponized our justice systems at every level. They did this with the intel agencies with Crossfire Hurricane. And these people who participated in this unprecedented Republican-ending lawfare and election interference against President Trump, his top aides like you, Steve Bannon, and Peter Navarro, who went to prison, his supporters on January 6th, who were politically persecuted under the Supreme Court's Fisher decision, parents getting targeted by the Biden FBI for raising hell about gender chaos in schools and the resulting rapes in high school bathrooms. They sent pro-life Christians, including a 75-year-old Christian to prison under the FACE Act because of this corrupt civil rights division by the Biden-Harris Justice Department. Kristen Clark, who's corrupt, who perjured herself to get the job, right? There has to be accountability for what happened. So I'm glad that they're fearful. I'm glad that they're crying. They should lawyer up because nobody is above the law, as they always told us. And if they didn't commit a crime, they have no reason to be fearful. They have no reason to be crying, right? Because, of course, you don't prosecute for non-crimes, do you?
Welcome to another episode of Counterculture, the show that stands at the intersection of reason and faith in the battle against sentimentality. That clip was Article 3 Project founder Mike Davis on Steve Bannon's podcast, ably representing what appears to be the Trump's perspective on the federal government. Those who use their substantial police power in agencies like DOJ, FBI, CIA, and the intelligence community to tear their political opponents asunder for the sole crime of being political opponents are in for a reckoning, and Trump and company will not be dissuaded by tears. Gates for AG, Gabbard for DNI, and if the rumors are true, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya for NIH. A pattern emerges here. Where he can, Trump is putting loyalists in place who are targeted by the agencies they will now head. The hunted become the hunters. It's life imitating the 2020 movie The Hunt, at least metaphorically. And where he doesn't have a directly aggrieved person to nominate, he nonetheless is putting loyalists who share the belief that accountability as the predicate to culture change is the order of the day. Think John Radcliffe at CIA. Is Trump's perspective the proper one in these times? Can agency leaders, with perhaps a little outside help from DOGE, change the culture within while fulfilling their charge from the American people to protect us from threats, foreign and domestic, to jumpstart the economy, and to restrain government from its unconstitutional and often ugly overreaches? And based on his cabinet selections to date, is he putting together the right team to give himself the best chance to accomplish these complementary paradigm shifts within a 2-year horizon? To provide answers and insights on these topics, we're pleased to be joined again by KT McFarland. KT is the former First Deputy National Security Advisor to President Trump and the author of the book Revolution, Trump, Washington, and We the People. KT, welcome. Thank you for joining us again. Appreciate it.
It's always a pleasure and an honor. Thanks.
So just give us let's start with the national security team, your bailiwick. So Rubio at Secretary of State, Waltz at NSA, Radcliffe at CIA. Your perspective on the team he's put together.
I think these
Tulsi
are all
Gabbard.
Pete Hex at the defense. I think these are all just terrific appointments. First of all, they're all smart, they're knowledgeable, they're tough, they're principled. I mean, they don't back down from a fight, any of them. And not only do they share Donald Trump's worldview and the national security sense, but I think they also share his opinion that the federal government has just gotten way out of control. way out of control, particularly there's no constitutional role for the fourth arm of government. The administration is supposed to be the executive branch, is supposed to run the executive branch, not the other way around. And I just keep going back to, there was a statement that Colonel Vindman made. He was an NSC staffer when I was the Deputy National Security Advisor. I tried to get him fired. I found out you can't fire anybody in government. But in the impeachment hearings, when he was asked, well, why do you think Donald Trump should be impeached? And Vindman said, well, it's because Donald Trump did not go along with the agreed interagency policy towards Ukraine. Bingo, the light bulb went out of my head. These guys don't think the president of the United States should be making the decisions. They think they should be making the decisions. They think presidents come, presidents go, but they're the guys in charge. And to me, having been in government, having been out of government, having seen the abuses of the federal government to average citizens, but certainly to people of the opposite political party, this has got to stop. If you don't get a handle on this, and Donald, as you point out, Donald Trump probably has two years to do it. If you don't get a handle on this, then forget it. These guys are in charge forever.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's a great aha moment. The idea that they think the president is accountable to them rather than vice versa. But now, what about those legitimate criticisms? People that want Trump to succeed, but are a little taken aback, surprised by some of the appointments, and question whether or not, for example, Hegseth at DOD or even Tulsi Gabbard at DNI might be out over their skis. Why not bring somebody that is similarly loyal, similarly disposed, but has some time in the State Department or the Pentagon?
But they're not. I mean, when Pete, who's a good friend of mine, and I've known him since he, was basically got out of college. When Pete was appointed, there was a leading defense lobbyist said, "Who the heck is this guy? I've never heard of him." And I thought, another light bulb moment. And I said, yeah, you know why? Because you haven't bought him. You don't own him. He's an independent guy. He's going to work for President Trump. Look, I think these are the only people who can do it. If you start getting people from in the think tank world, or who are, been in and out of government over the decades, even Republicans, they're not going to be loyal to this new vision, this populist vision of taking power out of the hands of all these federal agencies that you never hear of, but seem to control everybody's lives, who don't do audits, who just spend like mad, take over all of the functions that they're supposed to be in the executive and legislative branch, this silent, deep state, if you want to call it that. The thing is, it's not so deep. It's right plain front and center. They're not trying to hide anything. They just think they should be in charge. And unless you have somebody with Donald Trump's, tenacity, strength, sharp elbows, these guys are going to find a way to, in every single case, smother this national mandate that has been delivered by the American people.
Well, and those establishment bulwarks, of course, are living in glass houses. All this criticism of Hegseth, and he's never run a big agency like this. There's, nobody's ever been able to really get their hands around the Pentagon, especially in its modern iteration. But this is against the backdrop of the news out just the other day that the Pentagon failed its 7th audit in a row. So, the idea that Hegseth is not prepared for this, it doesn't seem like anybody's prepared for this. And it speaks to, sort of going back to the DOGE boys, the need to sort of rethink what's going on under the roof at the Pentagon and everywhere else in government.
Yeah, government's no longer being run by common sense. I've been in the government, in and out of the government since the 1970s. And for example, in the Pentagon, there was, in the Reagan administration, Peter Grace, leading Wall Street guy, did a Grace Commission, kind of similar to the DOGE, Elon Musk look at government. And he had all these great recommendations. None of them were followed because, the bureaucracy doesn't want to follow them. And when you get to the point where we now are, where the people in the bureaucracy, they can leak selectively to their friends in the Democrat media, they can slow walk any recommendations from a president, they can really do whatever they want. It's gone beyond the point of takeover by government. And even in the Pentagon, the Pentagon hasn't had a full top to bottom audit probably since before you were born, Dan. And the reason they don't do it is every time they try, and Congress legislates it, A president will ask for it, but it gets kind of put on the back burner. And the guys at the Pentagon say, well, it's really hard because we have really old systems of communication, and the Army system doesn't talk to the healthcare system and the Navy. I mean, it's just they always come up with an excuse. It's usually a technical excuse, but they never do what they're supposed to do. We don't know how much money is in there sort of sloshing around. We don't know how much of it is lost. We don't know how much of it's going to corruption. We don't know how much of it is even going to the defense contractors. So I sure hope Elon Musk and DOGE and Vivek start with the Pentagon. That's the biggest, hardest nut to crack. Once you do that, all the others fall into place.
By the way, just for the record, you mentioned you were in and out of government since the 1970s. KT started in government at the age of 12. So that explains the...
Actually, and I was 18, so... And okay. It was the Nixon administration.
So I wanted to get your perspective on Tulsi Gabbard, though, too, because, this is a pick from, from the other side of the aisle, at least until recently. But again, somebody that was very curiously targeted by the intelligence community, the Open Skies program, where she was on essentially a watch list because of her views on international affairs, it would seem. And what we know about Gabbard from her time in Congress and how aligned you think she is with, more of a paleocon perspective on the world that I think you have, and I certainly have too.
Okay, so I'm on the board of CPAC, which is this national organization. It's like the mothership organization for all the other conservative organizations in the country. And we have a big event every February. 10,000 people come from all over the world. And we asked Tulsi to speak a couple of years ago. And it was a pretty, wow, are we having a Democrat come to the most conservative Republican conference and she's going to speak? And she came and she gave a spirited argument in favor of a limited government and talked about the Constitution and how the federal bureaucracy had grown way beyond anything that any of the founding fathers or even FDR had thought that they should be. And at that point, and I've gotten to know her pretty well since, she is principled. She has a lot of common sense. And I don't think she cares what the label is, Republican or Democrat. She and President Trump see eye to eye. And the irony of someone like Tulsi Gabbard, who is a lieutenant colonel in the Army Reserves, who is a stellar combat record, somebody who is a member of Congress, and somehow some faceless, nameless government bureaucrat decided to put her on a watch list. So when she tried to travel abroad, it made it almost impossible for her to ever catch her plane because they had to go through many, many more checkpoints than they should. And we would never have known about that unless it was for a whistleblower, who I believe is now being punished by that agency. So you need somebody like Tulsi Gabbard. And I love the way, Dan, that you framed this as we went into it, saying, the hunted have now become the hunters. And that's why only those people can work. You can't get same old, because if you get same old kind of people, you're going to have same old policies.
And the same old is coming from the left now. So Trump and everybody in term one were Russian assets, and that allowed the Russian collusion hoax to go on for 2+ years. Adam Schiff's still sticking to it. And now you have people like Debbie Wasserman Schultz calling Tulsi Gabbard, a person whose record you described, somebody who served our country honorably. She's a Russian asset now too.
When the Democrats kind of run out of arguments, which they've run out of pretty clearly and pretty quickly because everything they've done has been a disaster in the last several years, what do? Well, they usually say it's a sexist. Can't do that against a woman, so it can't work there. Usually it's a racist. Well, Tulsi Gabbard is a mixed race, so you can't call her a racist. Well, what's left to call her? Oh, I know. We'll call her a Russian agent. It just makes no sense. It didn't make any sense the first time around. It doesn't make any sense now. And then you have to look at the people doing the name calling and saying, really? Is that the best you can do? Do you have to go there? Why don't you make a good argument for why your policies should work? Why do you have to just go right to character assassination and name calling? It makes me think that maybe they don't have anything they can brag about of their own record.
And they just like character assassination. I mean, that's just have an affinity for it. Maybe that could be part of it too. I wonder, since you were, as I mentioned, first deputy NSA, Trump 1.0, what, everybody's talking about what he's learned 1.0 to 2.0 as somebody who is on the inside, your perspective as you see this team taking shape. the difference between Trump in 2017 versus Trump in 2024, soon to be 25.
Okay, so I was on the transition team at Trump 1.0, and we were starting from scratch because a lot of establishment Republicans, the never Trumpers, didn't want to work for Trump, and frankly, Trump didn't want them because those are the people that had all the losing policies. So we were kind of starting from scratch, and Donald Trump wasn't a creature of Washington. I don't think he'd ever even stayed overnight in Washington before he moved into the White House. So it was starting from zero, and I think he trusted the recommendations of people to appoint this person, that person. It turned out this person or that person didn't want to work for Trump. They wanted to work for themselves, and they thought they were smarter than Trump and that Trump didn't know enough. And so that's why it was all this Sturm und Drang. This time around, and I just returned actually from Mar-a-Lago. I was there during the weekend. I saw the president, saw almost all the senior cabinet picks, all the national security team, and they know what their job is. They know what the job is. They know what the mission is. They know who's the boss. They don't think they're smarter than the boss. They're not going to fight the boss. What they want to do is work with the boss, Donald Trump, to reform the government. And it was really exhilarating because these people are not fools. They know that they're going to get beaten up and sabotaged and torn through. I mean, as Steve Bannon said, this is like every day is going to be Stalingrad during World War II with Hitler at the gates. They know it's going to be really, really tough. But they also know that if not now, when? Because if you don't do it now, you'll never catch that train.
You know, just the accountability piece. I know the left is referring to it as vengeance, but you know, accountability and vengeance are not synonyms, despite what they think.
Mm-hmm.
The accountability piece, I mean, and thinking about Gabbard, to some extent Gates, definitely Jay Bhattacharya, if he is indeed named NIH, as I mentioned at the outset. These are people targeted by agencies that now Trump wants to put on top of those agencies, which I think is really a nice message to send. But you were somebody who was targeted in the first administration, mm-hmm. among many, as part of the Russian collusion conspiracy that the left fomented and perpetuated for years, as we know. And I just wonder, like, what your perspective on accountability and the necessity of it, that there has to be some reckoning in order to send a message that there is going to be a paradigm shift and people will be held accountable professionally and perhaps legally for what they do under the color of law.
You know, I think you're right to distinguish like what is revenge and what is accountability, because they're two very different things. Trump's not a revenge guy. In the first transition, when everybody around him said, let's prosecute Hillary for whatever. And he said, leave her alone. She'll never be president. She spent her whole life wanting to be president. Just leave her alone. Let's do our thing. This time around, there's got to be some accountability. And I don't think that the people, certainly the people like Tulsi Gabbard, Rick Grinnell, if he has a position, defense, all these different people that they're appointing, they don't want vengeance. They just want to fix it. And so, for example, one of the first places to start, there were 51 former CIA agents, intelligence officials, who signed a letter saying that Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. Now, that was election interference. It was coordinated by the CIA at the time, by active duty CIA people with former people, and they threw the election. They know, it was right before the last debate. Many people have said, well, if we thought that Hunter Biden laptop was real, we might not have voted for Joe Biden. And so that was election interference. But those people have never been held to account. They've never had to testify. They've never had they still have security clearances. They're still making money as defense consultants when in fact they really don't deserve it. What did they do for this country? They tried to elect their own guy as president. That's accountability, and that's taking those 51 people who think they're untouchable, taking those 51 people and calling them to account. Find out who in the CIA was coordinating the former officials, who was doing the election interference on American elections. Hold those people to account.
Because if you don't, then you're sending a message that to the establishment, to the IC community, to the administrative state, that we can wait him out. There may be a lot of tough talk. There might be some finger wagging, but he's not going to make really an example of anybody. And so we'll just continue the way we've always operated, and we can wait him out. I mean, you have to, I mean, I don't want to get too Machiavellian, but literally thinking about Machiavelli, I mean, you have to bring overwhelming accountability to people who have engaged in bad faith and bad actions to send a message that you never want to do this again. And that's the only way, it seems to me, you reestablish the balance of power between the government and the citizen.
And the other thing is you want to do it with complete transparency. The
Yeah.
way the way the deep state works is that they do it in the shadows. The Russiagate, for example. And if you're part of the intelligence community, what happened during the first Trump term? Well, it was the FBI accused Trump of all sorts of crimes, had the Mueller investigation, launched the impeachment, and yet nobody was ever held accountable. And then if you fast forward to 2020, well, the CIA was involved that time. And there was a CIA senior officials who interfered with and influenced an election. They were never held accountable. So unless somebody holds those people accountable, and they're big names, they're people that, they're household names, until they're held accountable and have to say what they did and why they did it, and then take the consequences of their action, guess what? It's going to keep happening time and time again, because they don't want to lose power, and they'll do anything to stay in power, including clearly election interference.
Well, that transparency point is such a critical one, because the other thing you do, and it seems to me, when with respect to changing the culture, is we're not going to tolerate the FBI director coming before Congress for years after the fact,
Mm-hmm.
like, for example, in the case of J6, and telling us, I don't know if there were FBI assets on the mall on January 6th. If there were, I don't know how many. It's an ongoing investigation. The ongoing investigation cover story to never level with the American people about anything that happened or is happening. It seems to me like that's another piece of the accountability. It's a professional piece but it's just as important to change the culture.
Yeah, so here's how they get out of having to testify, is they launch an investigation, even a fake investigation. So then every time CIA, FBI, whoever they are asked, well, a direct question, oh, no, can't talk, not at liberty to talk about it because it's an ongoing investigation. What I would suggest, and this is just me talking, but I've certainly suggested it to some of the people around President Trump, just declassify it all. Just, the problem with the government people, they don't have the fortitude to do anything on their own. There's going to be a huge paper trail of who gave me permission to do this, who gave me permission to do that. And in the past, I asked John Radcliffe once, you were DNI, why didn't you declassify all that stuff about Russiagate? And he said, well, they tell you their sources and methods, and if you declassify it or you release it to the public, people are going to get hurt, people are going to die. And I've said, look, I've been at this game for 50 years. That's always the excuse they give you when they know they've screwed up and they don't want you to see what they've done. I think just open up. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. If we find out what all those people were doing because we released what they were saying at the time, let them take the consequences. And then, as you say, never again is the deep state going to have the nerve to do it, because they know they won't get away with it next time.
Well, and the whole sources and methods and people in the field. Okay, I'll tell you what, we're going to pull whoever you think is vulnerable out of the field, bring them in-house, right. Now release everything. And so everybody's protected and we get the truth, right?
Yeah. Sunlight is always sunlight, best disinfectant.
Yeah, Brandeis was right. The other ideas that you have, or maybe suggestions you've offered, just thinking about the intelligence, since you mentioned you've been a part of this for so long, what you see in terms of angles and opportunities that may inform what some of Trump's secretaries do.
You mean the opportunities for government reform or for policies?
For government reform specifically, the inside culture.
Okay, so the threat of budgets makes the whole difference, right? And Elon and Vivek, I saw Vivek over the weekend, and they're talking about government's way too big, too many people, too many pension plans, too many gold-plated salaries. And all those people just keep spending your money. They're printing your money and spending your money. But what about if you reduce, what does Elon Musk say? He thinks he can reduce government workers by 25%. Well, that's a good first start. And in addition to that, then once you get rid of those people, then you can start cutting those programs, because every one of those people has some crazy program, whether it's, what was the latest one about whether vodka helps fish do something strange and makes them more aggressive in the water. Yeah. I mean, just crazy stuff we're spending American taxpayers' money on. But once you start going after the people who are proposing this stuff, it's much easier to cut the budgets. So if you start cutting the budget, then everybody's going to get a lot more nervous about, yikes, again, I can't get away with it anymore. I guess I better show what I'm really doing, and it better be something that can withstand scrutiny.
Right. I mean, it's an important dot connector here, because people look at it and say, well, federal government salaries only account for about $110 billion of spending in a $6 trillion spend last year. But you start to connect the personnel to the programs, and you eliminate the personnel so you can eliminate the programs, and you get that multiplier effect, right?
Yeah. I mean, Vivek talked about that this weekend when someone asked him, well, you're talking about furloughing or retiring civil servants, and you're going to give them 2 years of pay if they quit, if you can get rid of them. And that's terrible. They should only have 2 weeks notice of severance pay. And he made your point. He said, well, it's annoying, and as it is, that you're paying the salaries of these people who aren't doing anything to help you. The money that they control is so much bigger than their salaries.
Yeah.
So you got to get both of them. You've got to get the individuals, and you've got to go after the programs.
And you have to get some weak-kneed Republicans in the House and Senate to go along with all this as well, because everybody has their idiot nephew in a particular agency and their pet programs that they want to bring pork home. And so that's another layer of complication, which I'm sure Musk and Vivek are going to have to navigate.
Look, Musk went into Twitter and he goes in and says to half the people, what are you doing here? What's your job? I don't get it. And he cut the workforce by 75%. And it made it a better product. And now he's made money on it. So he knows how to do this. And I think that especially Vivek and particularly Elon Musk, they're original thinkers. Like, they go back to the beginning. What's our purpose here? What's our function? They don't just look at, well, we've always done it this way, we should always do it this way again. And whether it was with Twitter, whether it was with Tesla, with cars, whether it was with SpaceX, Elon Musk has shown he goes back to the basics and said, just because we've done it this way, doing it the way we've always done it, it's not working. Let's rethink the mission and the function. So I think there's going to be a huge shakeup coming. I mean, huge shakeup. And it's not just going to be the little bit nibbling around the edges. I think that they're looking at eliminating whole agencies, or taking something like, and again, this is me talking, not the president, but taking something like the intelligence community. There are 18 different agencies. What are they all doing? Why do we need them all? Or if you look at the FBI, what is the FBI's job? Well, it seems to be going after Catholic suburban housewives who go to school board meetings. Aren't they really supposed to be looking for criminals? Aren't they supposed to be looking for, pedophiles or child molesters? Why are they doing that? So maybe you take the FBI and chop it up to a bunch of different parts and send it back to the appropriate agency. If it's an agency that's dealing with crime, financial crimes, it shouldn't be in the FBI. It probably should be over at Treasury. If you're dealing with somebody who's doing commerce stuff where they're cheating about exporting things, does that really belong at the FBI? Maybe that belongs at Commerce. So these kinds of fundamental rethinks, these are the guys who are very comfortable doing that. So go for it.
I wanted to get your take on a couple of active theaters here, because part of the Trump promise is essentially to get us out of foreign entanglements, if I can borrow from Sly Stallone, channeling George Washington. And so Eastern Europe. And interesting, the signals that we're already getting from both Zelensky and Putin with the prospect of Trump's inauguration. Zelensky seeming to indicate that he's willing to negotiate, as he suggested that he thinks Trump has the promise to bring an end to the hostilities.
Yeah, the terrible thing about the Biden administration, they would not let Zelensky negotiate. They wanted to keep fighting because their attitude was, well, we have to punish Russia, and Russia should not be rewarded for invading a country. Okay, right, but then how do you stop it? What's your plan? What's your practical common sense plan here? And the Democrats, whether it was the Obama people or the Biden people, we'll give them a little bit more weapons, or we'll do a little bit more. But Ukraine is never going to win a war of attrition. Not with Russia. Not with Russia, which is rich with oil revenues, thanks to the Biden energy policy. Russia's flush with cash. So how do you figure this one out? And it's an administration like Donald Trump. He said, so the thing I love about Donald Trump is he's pretty straightforward. So he says, here's what we're going to do on day one. We're going to drill, baby, drill. We're going to become not just energy independent again, but we're going to become energy dominant. which means the US has the energy capabilities and resources to power the world with our own oil and natural gas for hundreds of years. Cheaper, safer, cleaner, faster than anybody else. So if we unleash that ability, what does that do to the global market? Well, it pushes the price of oil and gas down. And what does that do? It bankrupts Iran, it bankrupts Russia. It has to bring them to the negotiating table because they can't fight. These guys may want to fight forever, Russia and Iran, but if they don't have the money to do it, they can't do it. So Trump understands the economic weapon. Hit them where it hurts, take away their ability to fight or to pay for wars. And then he says, but he also is going to get on the phone. This will be a long day one. And he's going to get on with Putin and say, you go to the negotiating table or I'm giving Ukraine everything to just blow you to smithereens. And then he's going to say to Zelensky, you go negotiate or I'm not going to give you a darn thing. And so then he's going to force a negotiation. And then the terms of it, well, that's up to them. But you got to get them to the table. And Biden's people have refused, even when Zelensky has asked, could we please go to the table? They said, no, you keep fighting.
And the piece of this too, I mean, you saw the signal from the EU right after Trump's election, from the president of the EU saying, maybe we should buy a little bit less of our liquefied natural gas from Russia and a little bit more from the United States. So now, energy independent, energy exporter, taking markets away from Russia too. I mean, so Putin clearly sees those signals as well in terms of what you're talking about, reducing his capacity to prosecute wars.
The foresight of Donald Trump, and he gets there intuitively. He doesn't read foreign affairs magazines all day long like you and I probably do. But he understood that the Europeans, especially Germany, would become so dependent on Russia and subject to blackmail from Russia if they bought all their oil and natural gas from Russia. So he warned them, 8 years ago, don't buy that stuff. Buy American stuff. But whatever you do, don't get yourself in a position where Russia can blackmail you on energy. And they didn't listen. They said, no, we're much smarter than you are. We know it's all going to be good. Russia would never use the economic weapon to blackmail us because they need our money. And of course, Trump was right. And so now the Europeans are going to walk that back. And great. So glad we're getting there because American liquefied natural gas, again, cheaper, safer, cleaner. Europe should, no strings attached, and Europe should just buy from us. Everybody should buy from us.
And in the Middle East, obviously he has been supportive of Israel's prosecution of the war on terror there. And he has a good relationship with Netanyahu, which distinguishes himself from the current administration again. But how should we conceive the administration's approach to the Middle East now? Is this to sort of restart the Abraham Accords angle of trying to build better relationships between moderate or moderating Arab countries and Israel? Is it to just back Israel's play against Iran? Is it to do a combination of the two? What do you think the thinking is there?
Well, I think President Trump brings back the maximum pressure campaign, which is one of the things I helped organize against Iran and against North Korea. And that's you bring all sorts of pressures to bear, economic, military, diplomatic, etc. But what President Trump has said is he said to Israel, finish the job, just do it quickly, but finish it. And then what he also said to Iran in the closing days of Trump 1.0 is that we knew that Iran was on the ropes. When Trump walked into office on day one in 2017, oil was at $120 a barrel. That was Obama's oil price. Trump leaves office, and because he had encouraged the U.S. energy industry, it was $40 a barrel. So for countries like Iran and Russia, which rely almost exclusively on the sale of that oil and natural gas, they were broke. When President Trump, at the end of the Trump administration, we knew that the Iranians were having real trouble feeding their people. And we could see that the Hezbollah and Hamas, and maybe not the Houthis because they weren't really in the mix at that point, they were complaining to say, wait, you guys have been paying for us for a long time. Where's our money? And Iran didn't have the money to pay them. I thought Iran was very close to the point where they'd either need to do a deal on America's terms. If not, then they would face domestic unrest against them. But fast forward, so Biden comes in, undoes Trump's energy policy. Sure enough, oil goes from $40 back to $100 a barrel. It's a little bit less than that now. And what did that money do? It gave a windfall to Iran. And that's the money Iran has used to make war against Israel. So take that money away. Israel has done us all an enormous favor by hurting and really degrading Hezbollah and Hamas. And let's just see a new Middle East. Let's reinvigorate those Abraham Accords and put Iran in a box where it either has to accommodate peace, and if not, a bankrupt Iran, those mullahs are going to have a very angry and restive population and may decide to have another Iranian revolution.
And so if Trump is able to diminish the capacities of both Russia and Iran, what does China do? Does China prop them up, or does China leave them behind?
Big question. What China may want to do, and I'm not going to sort of second guess China, but they could sort of go in two directions. One, they could say to the Russians, we're going to take all of Eastern Siberian oil fields. We need to import energy. I mean, China's one of the most energy needy countries in the world, and they don't have oil, they don't have natural gas, they have dirty coal. And so they have to get it from somebody. But if they're not being able to get it from Russia or Iran, which is where they get it from now, because we'll reimpose and enforce those sanctions, then China has a choice. Are they going to maybe somehow annex part of Russia and take the oil that way? Or are they going to buy from us? Now, if China wants a good economic relationship with the United States, which they've come out in the last 3 days and said, well, maybe they should buy our energy. Because the other thing about the Chinese relationship with the U.S. is that, and again, Donald Trump, because he's not a think tank guy, he's not a business as usual Washington guy, he understood one fundamental fact that no politician had understood. China needs to sell stuff to us more than we need to buy cheap stuff from them. We can buy cheap stuff from a lot of different places. China has to sell stuff to us. So that gives us enormous leverage in any trade agreement or any kind of relationship between the United States and China.
Last one, the border, of course. The prospect of using military as part of the effort to do, mass deportation is the word that's used, but it's really surgical deportation by category. That's the way Tom Homan has laid it out. And, some of the tools that Trump used the last go around included sort of using foreign aid as a leverage point for Mexico and Central and Southern American countries to not be pushing their people to our southern border. Mm-hmm. And now that runs maybe a little bit into the DOGE boys who want to reduce the spend, but what is your assessment of that border security team, starting with Noam and obviously Tom Homan is central, and Stephen Miller, and the approach, if it's going to be any different this time around than it was the first go around, where Trump was and did make significant progress in border security.
Well, the problem obviously is much worse, because now we have who knows how many millions of illegals in this country that've got to go. So that'll be a law enforcement issue of how do you find those people and how do you send them back, and who do you start with? And I think it's a no-brainer to start with the people who are convicted criminals. As President Trump points out, a lot of those people are hardcore convicted rapists, murderers, etc. Get rid of them first. But the other part of the problem is to prevent more from coming in. Now, that involves foreign policy and our relationship with Mexico. Now, the Mexican government, the new Mexican government, has said, no, we're not going to cooperate. No, we're not going to. And yet, what President Trump did to get the Mexican government to cooperate in 2017 was then the president said, no, we're not going to cooperate. We're just going to send them through from Central America, through Mexico, and on into the United States. And President Trump said, no, you're not. And they said, no, we are. And then what did he do? He slapped a 25% tariff on all Mexican goods coming into the United States. That phone rang so fast of the Mexican president saying, Mr. Trump, Mr. President, we have reconsidered. We want to help you seal that border. And I think he does it again because, again, Trump understands the trade weapon and the economic weapon more than think tank Washington guys, just because he's a businessman.
And, the other side, that's been proposed, I wonder what your thought is too, the remittances from people in this country illegally back to family, friends, whatever, in their home countries, you could tax that as well, transaction tax, and encourage some self-deportation too.
There are many ways to peel this onion, and I have full confidence, especially when you look at the team that President Trump has put together, especially somebody like Tom Homan. Man, that guy has been, screaming until he's hoarse in the throat and people won't listen to him. And for years, he's been making the case and nobody has paid him attention except for Donald Trump. And now to have that guy in charge of the border, I'm sleeping easier at night.
Well, and the whole thing, and Homan is representative of this, it seems that it's sort of replete throughout the team is, they're all pretty good communicators. And Homan is a little bit gruff. He's not, the polished kind of windblown guy, but he's so knowledgeable on the topic. And his distillation of the border is as good as anybody's talking about. Look, the people that want to enforce the border, they're the ones on the humanitarian mission. We're trying to protect people on both sides of the border, because when you don't, then people on both sides of the border get hurt or killed or grossly exploited. And I think, that is the perfect way to elucidate what they're doing and why they're doing it and bring people along. Going back to what we were saying about transparency. And I like the idea that, sort of across these agencies, Trump is installing people that are good at making the case, good at developing the argument so that you can bring America along as you pursue these policies.
Yeah, and I would start with Trump himself, obviously, but J.D. Vance, for example. He's thinking way outside the box when he was asked, well, you have to have these illegals in the country because they'll work for cheap wages that Americans won't work for, so we need them. And he said, well, let's rethink that. Maybe if we paid those people, those Americans, a little bit of a better wage, instead of paying them not to work, maybe we should pay them a little bit more for a decent wage, and then they would work, and then we wouldn't need to import the illegals. So the case he was making is we're importing the illegals to do the cheap labor that Americans don't want to do because they're not adequately compensated. And so as a result, we're paying those people not to work. And again, he makes a really good case very simply. Matt Gaetz is a really terrific communicator. He's tough as nails, obviously. But he's as smart as could be, and he'll make that case. I remember once being on with Maria Bartiromo on Fox Business, and I don't even remember what the issue was, and she walked into the interview really critical of him. And he was making, and then he said, no, let me make the case. And boom, 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 he laid it out. At the end, Maria Bartiromo, who knows the economic Wall Street world better than anybody, she said, you know something? I think you've changed my mind. So he knows how to negotiate and argue. Every one of them is articulate, and every one of them is fearless.
All right. On that happy note, as we watch confirmation hearings play themselves out in the public arena for 2 months before the actual confirmation hearings, KT McFarland, former first deputy NSA under Trump 1.0. KT, thanks so much for joining us again. Appreciate your insights and your time.
It's always an honor and a pleasure, and especially because you always have you elevate the conversation. We always have a really good, thoughtful, thought-provoking conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I enjoy talking to you. It's great. Really, really helpful. And for people to get an understanding of everything that's going on, there's nobody better. So KT, thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Dan.
Please like this video and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. And please leave a comment in the comment section. We'd love to hear your thoughts.